I think that a lot of people still have this very romanticised understanding of what it means to be mentally ill and what it means to be in treatment and what it means to be in recovery. And my friends and my family say all the time, it must be so hard for you, and we can't imagine how difficult it's been, and we know how hard you've worked. And it's not that I don't think that they're being sincere, but I also think that a lot of people have this impression that when I was, really, really ill this time last year, or even still now when I'm, going through this recovery period, that I kind of go to therapy, have a good cry, get a hug, pat on the shoulder, talk about my feelings, and then, I go home and my mum makes a meal for me and sort of brushes my hair and compliments me whilst I eat to make me feel nice and relaxed. Like, that's just not what it's like whatsoever. My recovery period was characterized by a lot of screaming, a lot of crying, a lot of arguments, moments where I really felt like I was tearing my family apart, moments where I thought that my mum and dad were going to have to quit their jobs to stay home and look after me. Shed load of guilt, a lot of isolation, and a lot of me dreading therapy every week because I knew that I was going to get shouted at. And my therapist, my psychologist, I still go to sessions with her and I absolutely adore her, and she really, really did save my life. I owe her so much. But she wasn't all that nice to me when I was at my worst. She would tell me how it was. She would tell me all the time to get my shit together, to pull myself together, to start looking after myself, to start being a responsible adult. She would tell me all the time to grow up and to face my problems like an adult and not behave like a child. And I would, leave most of my therapy sessions crying, not because I was so, overcome and overwhelmed with emotion, but because I essentially got shouted at like a student being shouted at by a teacher. It would happen every single week, and every week I would go in and be like, oh, I really don't want to take the medication because I'm scared of the side effects. And she would literally just look at me, and I can't even count how many times this would happen. She would shout at me and say, take responsibility for what you are doing for yourself, take responsibility for your recovery, and if you don't start to do the things that we talk about in our sessions, then I will discharge you because there's no point. I went through that so many times, and it was only by her telling me those harsh truths that I managed to get myself together. And I'm not saying that that's going to work with everyone, and that's, what it's like across the board, but that's what it was like for me. It was extremely, extremely difficult. It was very, very painful, and I think people don't really realise how terrifying it is to have brought your body into that condition and not know how to get out. As far as I was concerned, I was just skipping the odd meal. I had lost my appetite because I was stressed about exams, and maybe I'd lost a bit of weight. But then the next minute, my friends are telling me, you really don't look well. You haven't been out of bed in however many weeks. You really haven't eaten in a while. Are you okay? And then I stand on the scale and realise that I've lost over a stone in under 2 months. And seeing that number on the scale, in my head, I thought that was going to be a dream come true. I thought that that's the moment that I wanted to reach. But in reality, when I saw it, I wasn't excited. I wasn't happy. I was terrified. I was so scared. And even when I started treatment, even when I decided that I wanted to get out of it, that number kept dropping. And it got to a point where I was like, I don't know if I'll ever get out of this. I feel like no matter what I do and no matter what I tell myself, I don't get better. There's no point. I need to work out how I'm going to survive. And every night, that was the thought that kept me up. It was, how do I keep up this behaviour and still get to live? Because there was a lot of moments where I really, really thought that I might not. or that I really thought I might not let myself. So please, when you're supporting a friend, do not undermine, do not for a second think that it's an easy thing to go through. And I don't think people do really think it's an easy thing, but I also don't think people really get how hard it is and how traumatic it is. There is no miracle pill, there is no treatment, there is nothing that, you know, you can't just sort of sit in a hospital bed whilst you get drugs administered to you and then wait for your body to get better. You have to work at it, and it's very, very scary to be in a position where you know that you're killing yourself, but you really, really don't know how to get out, and you don't know how to stop doing it. And it's terrifying. It's actually, it's traumatic. It's a trauma that emotional trauma, that moment where I saw that number on the scale and I was like, I might die from this, that's still with me. And that is what I'm working on now in therapy more than anything. It's not the eating disorder, it's everything that came after that. So please don't believe what you see in films. Please don't believe that people want to have eating disorders, because nobody wants to go through suffering like that. And if somebody does want to actively enact that suffering on themselves, then please bear in mind how much pain they must be in and support them accordingly.